Hello, welcome to week 13. It's good of you guys to stay with this semester. I'm very proud of you. You've made it this far. So we only have 2 more weeks left in the semester. We can see it. It's so close. We can almost taste it. So good job. Hang in there. I know you guys will do great. Chapter 13 was all about working with industrial property. Last week we talked about, the chapter was on retail property. I am sorry I didn't post a video for you. Industrial property is much different from retail and much different from residential, which we are more familiar with because we see it more on a daily basis. Industrial property isn't always at the forefront of what we see on a daily basis unless we work in an industrial facility or an industrial park. So I know you guys are basically getting the gist down because it's been reintegrated in each chapter that we've introduced, whether it be commercial property or residential property, that you need to look at your management plan and you need to do a regional and neighborhood analysis of the location and of the subject before you determine if you're going to be purchasing this property or managing this property. So it's always a good idea to look into the total overall area of the property, whether or not, this is going to be feasible for you to look at. You're going to look at, the traffic roads. You're going to look at the demographics, the tax rates, the income in the area. You're going to look at the neighborhood boundaries. What is the primary occupation in that neighborhood? And it's going to help you determine a better management plan for this specific property. So what is industrial property? Industrial property are properties that are used for production or storage or even sometimes manufacturing or distribution of products and or services that they could provide. There was one recently that I appraised that was for the distribution of cleaning products to the services that they provide. So they provide a cleaning service and the products are distributed to these service renders. So that was one that I just recently was able to get a tour of, which was really interesting. There are basically 3 types of industrial type properties. It could either be a single standalone industrial property. It could be a multiple tenant property, or it could be in an industrial park. And industrial parks are different from office parks in that basically you have a single-story row of industrial manufacturing. They could be separated, they could be attached, they could be standalone, but they're in a park where they're basically owned in a condominium type ownership where each individual owner can own the building, but the common areas are owned and operated by kind of an HOA area. So that is the difference between an industrial park and an office park. There are 3 different types of specific industrial space that are normally offered. The first one would be for general purposes, meaning it could fit any type of general industrial service that would be provided. And that's usually in the form of a shell building where there's not much interior. There's no real flooring or fixtures or tables or workspace offered. It's for the individual tenant to customize because they're going to be there for so long. They're going to need to customize it specifically for that business. The second one would be specific properties. So there are specific properties that are constructed in a way that are for heavy manufacturing or for a particular industry that requires access to the railroad system. So it's built next to the railroad so they can load up the rail cars, or next to a seaport so they can get their information and their products out onto those sea cargo decks. And then the last one would be for a single purpose, such as a airplane hangar. That's only for a specific purpose, and that is to harbor airplanes. You can't use that for residential purposes. It's not allowed. So that's some of the basics as far as industrial properties go. FTZ, we talked about that in the book. Foreign trade zones. This is where the government provides specific tax relief to those who are importing and exporting industries if you're within a specific zone by that jurisdiction. So it's really useful if you are going to be in the importing and exporting business. Usually with industrial properties, a leasing agent handles all of the marketing and the leasing for industrial properties. You can have a property manager do that, but leasing agents are usually the ones who do that for this type of an industrial property. And when an industrial property is listed either for sale or for rent, they would list it on a commercial website such as CoStar. And it's really minimal information that is given out there other than the location, the size, the square footage of the building, approximate price, which can be changed, or the terms of the lease if they want a 10-year lease, 20-year lease, and that can all be negotiated. The reason for those vague listings is because they don't want to sway or dissuade anybody from coming to take a look at their industrial property. So the more you specifically market towards a specific tenant, the more you are limiting the remaining tenants could possibly be prospective interested parties. The leasing term. So like we talked about a little earlier, the leasing term of the industrial property is usually long-term, 10 years or plus. Up to 99 years. I've seen leases that are 99 years. And those leases, usually the first year, they like to give their tenant, because it's going to be a long term, the lower rate, because that tenant is going to be putting a lot of their money into getting the building up to their specific requirements needed for production. After that 1 year, then they're going to increase that rent by the escalation clause. And usually it's either a specific amount that it's going to increase by, or it could be the consumer price index for that year, or the inflation rate for that year. And then it's determined whether or not there's going to be any additional pass-through charges that are given to this tenant. Are they going to be paying now for any of the utilities? Is it going to be insurance also required? Are they going to pay for taxes? And when we talk about taxes, we're looking at not only property taxes, but also business and income taxes as well. So that's something that needs to be considered when you look at industrial property, is for each specific area, the business taxes, the income taxes, the property taxes can be different depending on either the fixed special assessments, the tax rate area for that specific location. What was not in the book was the fact that these industrial properties can be triple net lease. And triple net leases are when all the charges that are incurred from this property are completely passed through the tenant. So the tenant pays for all of the expenses, whether it be maintenance and repair, as well as long-term repair, such as roof or HVAC replacements. That is where everything is paid by the tenant. And there are a lot of triple net leases out there. Rent is usually the first year based on the total square footage that they occupy. It could be a flat rate, but normally with industrial commercial properties, you're charged a rate based on the square footage that you occupy. And if there is multiple tenants, then they also get their prorated share based on their square footage. And any common areas, such as shared restrooms, shared utility rooms, lobbies, that kind of thing, they pay their proportional share. The property manager would then maintain those common areas, but the individual tenant occupant areas are owned, managed, and maintained basically by that tenant, even though they may not be owned, but they are managed and maintained by that tenant. They have to carry their own insurance and their own liability, but also the property manager or the owner has to make sure that they are adequately covered for insurance and liability charges as well. The common areas are all covered normally by the management as well as the exterior and the roof. If for some reason you need to evict a industrial tenant, what do you think the process is for industrial tenants? Yep, it's the same. It's basically the same as any residential tenant. You go through the 3-step process that we've already learned, where you're going to first post that notice for cure or quit, meaning they have not paid rent or they have violated a clause in the lease agreement. Next, you're going to file your unlawful detainer, and after your appearance in court or your mediation or whatever is required in your lease, next step would be the eviction notice and the eviction process if need be. So I am glad that you guys have gotten it this far with me. Good luck. I will hopefully see you all soon. Please email me if you have any questions, and talk to you soon.